Okay, so we're coming to the next topic known as your oral evidences, direct evidence, documentary evidence, the different types of evidences. Now, what they're saying is that all facts except documents must be proved by oral evidence. In the sense that if you're proving documentary evidence, you give documentary evidence to prove it. But if it is oral evidence, anything which is not a documentary evidence has to be proved by oral evidence. But then the contents of documents may be proved by either primary or by secondary evidence. So what are they saying over here? All facts except the contents may be proved by oral documents. Oral documents must in all cases be direct. So what do you mean by direct evidence? Direct evidence is what they're saying that if it refers to a fact which could be heard, the evidence of the witness who says he heard it. If it refers to any fact which is perceived by some senses, then again the evidence of the witness who has perceived it must give the witness. If it refers to some opinion, then it must be the evidence of a person who holds that opinion. So say for example that we have, to continue with our example, that outside of this classroom we hear a loud bang. Now we have heard it. So hence we are the only witnesses who can go and say we heard this. I cannot go and tell my friend, yes, at this time when a class was being conducted, we heard a loud bang. I tell my friend this. Now my friend cannot go and give witness for that. Similarly, anything which is perceived by other senses or opinions which are held, only the witness must come and give it, and hence that is known as the direct evidence. Okay. Now coming to documentary evidences. Document means any kind of letters, figures, marks, etc. for the purpose of recording electronic and digital records. Now what section 56 is saying is that the contents of documents may be proved either by primary evidence or by secondary. A primary evidence is simply another word for direct evidence. And secondary is another word for circumstantial evidence. Okay, so what is primary evidence? A primary evidence is any kind of a document itself. Primary evidence is that document itself, the original copy of the document that is produced for the inspection of the court. Only primary evidence is considered as the best evidence in law. But then secondary evidence refers to any kind of certified copies, copies made from mechanical processes. For example, Xerox or photocopies, copies which are made from or compared with the original, in the sense that there is an original document, someone has copied it in written form into another paper. Counterparts of documents against parties who did not execute them. For example, let's say that there are two parties to an agreement. The third party is not party to that agreement, but maybe the legal heir of one of the parties. Now he may have a photocopy of the document, but he doesn't have the actual original. Or he may have a counterpart of the document. He may have part B of the document. Okay. Oral accounts of contents of documents given by a person who he himself has seen it. Let's say for example that I have drafted a contract and the contract is being presented before me as evidence. Now to corroborate the fact that this is a contract, the court may show me that documentary evidence or that contract and ask me to confirm if this is the contract that is in question. So what are they getting? They're getting a witness to confirm orally about the existence of a document. That is what they're saying as oral accounts of the contents of the document. Or say for example, a police officer has recorded an FIR. The FIR itself is documentary evidence produced before the court of law. But the advocate might present the same FIR to the police officer who has been brought before the court as a witness. And the advocate may show the FIR to the police officer, asking them to confirm if this is something that they have written. Then any kind of an oral admission, written admissions, evidence of a person who has examined a document. All of these become secondary evidences. And remember, documents can be proved by both primary as well as secondary evidences. Now, section number 60 is talking about cases where secondary evidence can be given in relation to a particular document. Secondary evidence can be given for the existence, condition or contents of the documents, namely 1. Where the original is shown or appears to be in the possession of the owner, of the person against whom the document is sought to be proved, of any person who's out of reach or not subject to the process of court, or of any person legally bound to produce it, and when that person does not produce it. So, for example, we know that the original copy of the rental agreement exists, but I may merely be holding a photocopy of that document. A photocopy of a document is not final proof of anything, because remember, the direct evidence is always the proper proof. But I may show the photocopy to the judge, and I may ask the judge, kindly ask the other party to produce the original before the court of law. Then, where the existence, condition or contents of a document have been proved to have been admitted in writing by the person against whom it is proved or by his representative in interest. Again, I am bringing the example of the police officer who has written the FIR. Now, the police officer only wrote the FIR, but then when we are showing a copy of the FIR to the police officer who's been brought forward as a witness, then we are confirming that the police officer only has written this statement and not anybody else. When the original has been destroyed or lost, the party offering evidence of its contents cannot produce it within a reasonable time. In this case, a secondary evidence can be given, where the original cannot be so easily moved, either because it is really old and may be subject to decay, or for other reasons. Where the original is a document under section 74, where the original is a document permitted by this adhiniyam or any other law for the time being enforced to be given as evidence. When the original consists of numerous accounts and other documents which cannot be conveniently examined by the court, instead the court can the fact to be proved is a general result of the whole collection. So, in short, you can prove the other documents through secondary evidences. The next topic that we are coming to is presumptions. Presumptions are of law, of fact, as well as a mixture of both. Let's come down to the concept of estoppel. An estoppel is a provision in law where it's saying that where one person has declared something or has done something or omitted to do something, and as a result of this declaration, statement, action or omission, some other person has acted on this belief, then the person who made the declaration, act or omission cannot go back on his word. This is based on the maxim allegans contraria non est audiendis. That is, a person alleging contrary facts cannot be heard. A person cannot say one thing and do something else. A person cannot say something and reprobate. A person cannot blow hot and cold. A person cannot say one thing today and go back on his word tomorrow, because someone else has believed my sentences and acted as a result of it. So, to a certain extent, we can even say this would amount to cheating. But where there is a dishonest intention, we can say that if a person has fraudulently induced someone else to do something that he would normally not do, it would also amount to cheating. But the simpler provision for that is, if you have said something or if you have done something and on the basis of that a third person has acted on your statements, then you cannot retract your statement. So, in Saurabh Chundar versus Gopal Chundar, the doctrine of estoppel is based on the principle that it would be most unjust and inequitable if one person, by representation or conduct, has induced another to act as he would not have done otherwise. so as to, and the person who made the representation should not be allowed to deny or repudiate the fact. Then in the case of the Biju Patnaik University versus Sairam College, a private university was permitted to conduct special examinations for persons pursuing studies under a one-time approval policy. 67 students were permitted to appear, but then the university declined to issue degree certificates on the ground that they had to appear for further examination on the basis of some syllabus of the university. It was held that once students appear in their examination and the results declared, the university is estopped from taking a decision withholding the degree certificate after declaration of results. So, this is the best example to say that where one action is done, you cannot go ahead and change your statement at a later stage. We have different kinds of estoppel. We see estoppel in contract, in negligence, constructive estoppel, by silence, by election, etc. What do you mean by estoppel in silence? Estoppel in silence means that simply if I am a person who had a duty to answer your questions, and when you asked me a question, I simply stayed silent. I did not say anything. And as a result, the other person acted on this silence. I am estopped from changing my sentence later on. The same thing applies in case of contract, negligence, equitable estoppels, etc. We now come down to the concept of electronic evidence. Section 63 is saying that any information which is an electronic record, which was produced by a computer, which was recorded in a computer or copied into a computer or in electronic form, shall also be deemed to be a document. Then section 63 clause 2 is saying that in respect of the computer output, if the information was produced by the computer or a communication device during the period in which that computer was regularly used to store, process information, etc., by a person having lawful control over that device, then it's considered to be a valid information. Then if certain information was regularly fed into the computer in the ordinary course of business, if the if the communication device or the computer was operating properly, but during some period it was out of operation or it was not working properly, but not as to affect the electronic records of other documents. The information contained in electronic record is reproduced through the computer in the ordinary course of business. What they are saying is that the conditions with respect to the computer output is as follows. When is a court going to accept evidence that is in electronic form? 1. It must be produced by a computer which is regularly used to process information by a person having lawful control over that computer. Second one, during that period, information is generally fed into that computer. That means it is your own computer and you are feeding information into it. So this can be an office computer, it can be a personal laptop, etc. And even if that computer was not working properly during a certain period, it would not affect the contents stored in that computer. So say for example, one file is corrupted. It does not have the ability to corrupt all the remaining files. And the information is derived from the computer itself in the ordinary course of business. Why is the court saying this? The requirement in this Adhiniyam is that any computer record or electronic record given to the court must be authentic, and it must not be altered, forged, trimmed, or the use of corrective technology, etc., must not be there. And in such a case, such a computer output would be treated as direct evidence, which would eventually be admissible. Submission of certificate along with the electronic record. Now, how do we know that this electronic record is a valid electronic record? They are saying that you have to submit a certificate whenever you are submitting an electronic record. This certificate is proof that the electronic record is proper, it's not been tampered with, and it has not been altered. So therefore, in any judicial proceeding, a certificate shall be attached along with the electronic record. A certificate shall be attached with the electronic record every time it is submitted. That is, one, the certificate should identify the electronic record. It should also specify the manner in which it was produced before the court of law. It must give particulars involved in the production of that electronic record, which may be required to show that the electronic record was produced in the computer or communication device referred to in clauses A to E of subsection 3. That is, okay, any matters dealing with the signing of that electronic device, electronic record, and an expert shall be the evidence of any matter stated in the certificate. So the purpose of this section 63 clause, the purpose of section 63 is simply to specify that the electronic record submitted is a proper proof that it is not tampered with and it has been given in a proper manner. Section 66 of the BSA is saying that, except in case of a secure electronic signature, if the electronic signature of any subscriber is alleged to have been fixed to an electronic record, the fact that the electronic signature is the electronic signature of the subscriber must be proved. So, we already know from studying the Information Technology Act that we need to prove that the signature belongs to that person, or we need to believe that it originated from that person. Hence, where there is a use of an electronic signature, we must prove that this person only put that electronic signature or someone who was authorized by him. And section 66 requires proof of the same. So this is the last of proving what is electronic evidence and how it must be submitted under the terms of the BSA.